The most dangerous person in the room is usually the one no one notices. The decision had saved his company. 3 years ago, a single line buried in a 42-page report, overlooked by senior analysts, dismissed by his board, ignored by everyone, except one anonymous contributor whose recommendation had quietly rerouted millions of dollars and prevented what would have been a catastrophic collapse. Ethan Caldwell remembered the moment clearly. The silence in the boardroom, the hesitation, then his own voice, sharp and certain, choosing to follow that one suggestion. It had worked. Perfectly. But the name attached to it? Just initials. C. Whitmore. No face. No history. Just a ghost in the system. Now, sitting beneath the soft glow of a Manhattan restaurant's chandelier, Ethan glanced briefly at the quarterly report on his phone, thumb hovering over the same archived file he still hadn't deleted. The past didn't usually interest him. Results did. And yet something about that decision still lingered. Sir, your water. The glass touched the table with a quiet, precise sound. Ethan didn't look up. I didn't ask for sparkling, he said flatly, eyes still on the screen. It's still water, she replied, calm, neutral, almost weightless. He frowned slightly, more at the interruption than the words. Then, finally, he looked up. She was already stepping back. Black uniform. Clean lines. No hesitation in her posture. No attempt to please beyond what was necessary. Just efficient. Invisible. Exactly what he expected from a waitress. Ethan picked up the glass anyway, taking a small sip before setting it down again, without acknowledgement. Around him, conversations flowed. Low laughter. The clink of silverware, deals being hinted at between bites of overpriced steak. This was his world. Controlled. Predictable. Everyone had a role. Everyone had a price. What's your most expensive item? He asked without looking at the menu. A test, casual, thoughtless. The dry-aged ribeye. 38 ounces. She answered immediately. Not a second of delay. And the cheapest? The house soup. $8. Same tone. Same calm. Ethan smirked faintly. Interesting range. No response. He glanced up again. She was still there. Waiting. Not nervous. Not eager. Just present. Then I'll take neither, he said, leaning back slightly.
Surprise me.
A flicker, barely there, passed through her eyes. Not confusion. Not fear. Something else. Something he couldn't quite place. Of course, she said. No questions. No attempt to upsell. She turned and walked. Away, movement smooth, unhurried, like someone who had nowhere to prove she belonged. Ethan watched her for a second longer than necessary before returning to his phone. But his attention didn't fully settle. There was something off. Not wrong. Just unexpected. He had seen thousands of people like her. Servers, assistants, interns. Background noise in the architecture of power. They moved around him. For him. Because of him. But this one didn't feel like background. And he didn't like that. 5 minutes later, she returned. The plate was simple.
Clean.
Perfectly arranged.
No unnecessary garnish.
No attempt to impress. Your meal, she said, setting it down. Ethan glanced at it, then back at her. You didn't ask what I like. No, she replied. I assumed you'd prefer something efficient. He paused. Just for a second. The kind of pause no one usually noticed. But this time he did. The fork hovered above the plate for a fraction longer than it should have. Ethan studied the dish, not because he doubted its quality, but because he did not like being predicted. Not by anyone. He took a bite.
Precise seasoning.
Balanced texture. Nothing excessive. It was exactly the kind of choice he would have made himself if he had cared enough to decide. He set the fork down slowly. You assumed correctly, he said, his voice neutral. But there was something beneath it now. Not approval. Not yet.
Curiosity.
She gave a small nod. I try not to waste time. Yours or mine. There it was again. Not defiance. Not submission. Just a quiet statement of fact. Ethan leaned back slightly, studying her more directly now. What is your name? Clara. Just Clara? That is usually enough. A faint pause followed. Not awkward. Just deliberate. Ethan tapped his finger once against the table, a habit he had when something did not fit into his expectations. You speak like someone who is not supposed to be here, he said. Clara did not react immediately. She adjusted the placement of a glass at the edge of the table, aligning it with the others to a level of precision most people would not notice. And where am I supposed to be? She asked, her tone unchanged. Ethan almost smiled. Almost. Not taking orders, he said. You do not seem like the type. Clara met his gaze then. Fully.
Come. No hesitation.
Everyone is taking orders from someone, she replied. Some people just choose who. The words settled between them, quiet but heavy. For the first time that evening, Ethan felt the conversation shift. Not dramatically, just enough to make him aware of it. He picked up his glass again, buying himself a second to think. And you chose this? He asked. For now. Not permanent, not apologetic, just temporary. That word lingered longer than the rest.
For now.
Ethan set the glass down again, more slowly this time. He was no longer just eating. He was observing.
Calculating.
What did you do before this? He asked. A simple question.
Direct.
The kind that usually produced immediate answers. Clara did not answer immediately. She glanced briefly toward another table, noting a guest who needed attention, then back to him. Always aware. Always measured. Different things, she said. None of them required explaining a menu. Ethan exhaled softly through his nose. Not amused. Not irritated. Something in between. That is not an answer. It is the only one that matters. Another pause. This one longer. Around them, the restaurant continued as if nothing had changed. Conversations, laughter, the low hum of controlled luxury. But at this table, something subtle was unfolding. Ethan leaned forward slightly now, elbows resting just enough to suggest interest without surrendering control. You are very careful with your words, he said. Clara tilted her head a fraction. Words tend to last longer than people expect. And just like that, something clicked. Not fully. Not yet. But enough to register. Enough to make Ethan's attention sharpen. He reached for his phone again, unlocking it with a quick motion, scrolling past emails, reports, numbers that usually demanded his full focus. But not tonight. Not completely. Instead, his mind replayed a sentence, a tone, a pattern, something familiar, something precise. He did not look up when he spoke again. Clara, he said almost casually, have you ever worked with financial models? There was no immediate answer, only the faint sound of a glass being set down at another table. Then her voice, just as calm as before. Sometimes. Ethan's thumb stopped mid-scroll. Just for a second. That same second from earlier. The kind no one noticed. But this time it stayed. The air did not change, but something in it tightened. Ethan lowered his phone slowly, placing it face down on the table as if the conversation now required his full attention. Sometimes, he repeated, testing the word. It was vague. Intentionally vague. He had spent years around people who used precision like a weapon, and he recognized it instantly when someone chose not to. That is not a common skill for this job, he said. Clara's expression did not shift. Neither is running a company, she replied. But here you are. The corner of Ethan's mouth moved, almost a reaction. Quickly suppressed. He leaned back again, but this time it was different. Not dismissal. Recalibration. You are avoiding the question, he said. Clara picked up the empty water glass, refilling it with the same steady motion as before.
No ruse. No hesitation.
You are asking the wrong one, she answered. The sound of water pouring was soft, almost rhythmic. It gave him just enough silence to think. Ethan watched her hands. Clean. Controlled. No wasted movement. Not the hands of someone who simply carried plates for a living. Then let me ask it differently, he said, his voice lower now. More focused. Where did you learn it? Clara set the pitcher down. Straightened the edge of the napkin beside his plate. Small adjustments. Always precise. In places where mistakes cost more than $8, she said. Ethan's gaze sharpened immediately. $8. The price of the cheapest item on the menu. She remembered.
Of course she did.
He leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the table now, no longer pretending disinterest. You keep referencing cost, he said. Most people in your position talk about effort. Clara met his eyes again.
Calm.
Unmoving. Effort is what people notice, she said. Cost is what they ignore. The sentence landed differently. Not clever. Not rehearsed. Just true. And that was what unsettled him. Ethan reached for his fork again, more out of habit than hunger, but he did not take a bite. Do you know who I am? He asked. It was a simple question. One he rarely needed to ask. Clara did not hesitate. Yes.
No elaboration.
No change in tone. And that does not change how you speak to me? Another small pause. Not long. Just enough to show she considered the question before answering. Should it? She asked. Ethan held her gaze. For a moment, the noise of the restaurant seemed to fade, not because it stopped, but because it no longer mattered. This was new. Not the conversation itself, but the lack of reaction he expected.
No deference.
No performance. Just presence. He exhaled slowly, leaning back again, but this time there was no attempt to re-establish control. Only observation. You said you worked with financial models, he continued. What kind? Clara's eyes flicked briefly to the side, noting a passing server, a table signaling for attention, the constant movement of a room that never paused. Then back to him. Always back. The kind that do not survive bad assumptions, she said. Ethan's fingers stilled against the table. That sentence. There it was again. Not identical, but close. Too close. Something from memory stirred, faint but persistent. A line in a report. A comment buried in margins. He did not move for a second. Then he reached for his phone again, unlocking it with deliberate slowness. His eyes scanned quickly, muscle memory guiding him through folders, archives, documents he had not opened in years. Clara watched him, but did not ask, did not interrupt. She simply stood there, as if she already knew what he was looking for. Ethan stopped scrolling, his eyes fixed on a single paragraph. One sentence highlighted. The same language. The same structure. He looked up. This time, there was no mask. Just a quiet, controlled intensity. Clara, he said, more carefully now. Have we met before? The question lingered in the space between them, quiet but sharp enough to cut through everything else. Clara did not answer immediately. Not because she did not have one, but because she did not rush to fill silence the way most people did. She simply looked at him.
Calm.
Measured. As if the weight of the moment did not belong to her. Ethan held her gaze, his phone still in his hand, the screen faintly glowing with that same archived document. The sentence was still there. Unchanged. 3 years old. And yet it sounded like it had just been spoken. Have we met before? He repeated, slower this time, more deliberate. Clara exhaled softly, almost imperceptibly, then glanced down at the edge of the table, adjusting a fork that was already perfectly aligned. A small movement. A way to think without appearing to hesitate. Not in a way you would remember, she said. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. Not suspicion. Not yet. But the beginning of it. That is not an answer. He said. Clara looked back at him. It is the most accurate one. The noise of the restaurant returned in fragments. A chair shifting. A glass clinking. Someone laughing too loudly across the room. But none of it reached the table. Not really. Ethan placed his phone down again, turning it so the screen faced her now. The document. The line. Clear. Unavoidable. This, he said, tapping once on the sentence, was written by someone named C. Whitmore. Clara's eyes moved to the screen, just for a second, then back to him.
No surprise. No denial.
Just recognition. That is a common name, she said. Ethan almost let out a short breath of disbelief. Almost. Not that common, he replied. His voice was quieter now. Not confrontational. Focused. This recommendation saved my company. Do you understand that? Clara did not respond right away. She looked at the screen again, but this time longer, as if she was not reading the words, but remembering the moment they were written. I understand the outcome, she said finally. Ethan leaned forward, his attention fully locked now. Then you know why I need to understand the source. A pause. Longer this time. Clara's gaze shifted slightly, not away from him, but past him, towards something invisible. A memory, perhaps. Or a decision already made long ago. You already made the decision, she said quietly. 3 years ago. Ethan's jaw tightened just slightly. I made a decision based on information, he corrected. Information has a source. Clara gave a small nod. Not agreement. Acknowledgement. Yes, she said. It does. Another silence. But this one felt different. Not empty.
Full.
Ethan sat back slowly, his mind moving faster now, connecting pieces that did not want to connect. The tone, the phrasing, the precision. All of it pointing in one direction he had not considered until now. See, Whitmore, he said, almost to himself. Then louder. Clara Whitmore. He looked at her again, searching for any sign that he was wrong. There was none. Just that same steady presence. Unshaken. Unmoved. And somehow confirming everything without saying a word. Ethan let out a slow breath, something close to realization settling into place. You wrote it, he said. Not a question. Clara did not smile, did not nod, did not step back. She simply met his gaze and said, I made a suggestion. The words were simple, almost understated, but the effect was not. Ethan stared at her, the room around them fading again, not because it had gone quiet, but because something far more important had just become impossible to ignore. And for the first time that night, he was no longer in control of the conversation. The words did not echo, but they stayed. I made a suggestion.
Simple. Precise.
Almost modest. And yet Ethan felt the full weight of it settle somewhere deeper than logic. He looked at her differently now, not because she had changed, but because he had. The same uniform, the same quiet posture, the same measured tone. But none of it fit the image he had built in his mind just minutes ago. A suggestion, he repeated, slower this time, as if testing the shape of it. That redirected a multi-million-dollar risk exposure and stabilized a collapsing projection. Clara did not correct him. She simply said, it was a variable adjustment. Ethan let out a soft breath, something between disbelief and reluctant respect. You make it sound small. It was small, she replied. The decision was not. There it was again. That separation. The line between action and consequence. Most people blurred it, took credit for outcomes, claimed ownership of results. But she did not. She never had. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his fingers resting lightly against the edge of the table now, no longer tapping, no longer impatient. Just still. Then why are you here? He asked. Not accusatory. Not even curious in the usual sense. It was something quieter. More genuine. Clara did not answer right away. She reached for the empty plate, lifting it with the same controlled movement as before, but she did not step away. Not yet. Because the outcome was yours, she said. Ethan frowned slightly. That does not answer the question. Clara glanced at the plate, then back at him. It does, she said. Just not the way you expect. A pause followed. Not uncomfortable. Just unresolved. Ethan studied her again, but this time he was not looking for flaws. He was looking for context. You could have taken credit, he said. Anyone in that position would have. Clara shook her head once. Not dismissive. Just certain. No, she said. Anyone in that position would have wanted recognition. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. And you did not? Clara met his gaze steady. As ever. Recognition changes the value of the work, she said. Sometimes that is not an improvement. The sentence settled slowly, like everything she said.
No ruse.
No need to convince. Just there, waiting to be understood. Ethan exhaled quietly, leaning forward again, this time without calculation. You walked away from it, he said. From that level of influence. Clara considered that for a moment. I stepped away from the noise around it, she corrected. The work does not disappear just because people stop looking. Ethan let out a faint breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. You realize most people spend their entire careers trying to get into rooms like that. Clara gave a small nod. Yes. And you left. Another nod. Yes. He watched her closely now, searching for hesitation, regret, anything that might make sense of it. There was none. Just clarity. Why? He asked. This time, the word came out softer. Less like a demand, more like a genuine need to understand. Clara finally stepped back half a pace, the plate now held lightly in her hand, but her attention still on him. Because I learned something, she said. Ethan did not move, did not interrupt.
What?
Clara's eyes did not waver. That being right and being heard are not the same thing, she said. The words landed differently. Not sharp.
Not heavy. Just true.
And somehow heavier because of it. Ethan sat there for a moment, the weight of that sentence settling into places he did not often revisit. Boardrooms. Decisions. Voices he had overlooked. People he had not remembered. He glanced down briefly at the screen of his phone, at the name that had been nothing more than initials until now. Then back at her. Clara Whitmore, he said quietly. Not as a question. Not even as a realization. Just as acknowledgement. And for the first time that night, the balance between them had shifted completely. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough to make one thing undeniable. He was no longer the one setting the terms of the conversation. The name did not need repeating, but it stayed in the air anyway. Clara Whitmore. Not initials. Not a footnote. A person. Standing less than 3 feet away, holding an empty plate like it weighed nothing at all. Ethan did not reach for his phone this time. He did not look at the report. He did not need confirmation anymore. The truth was already sitting across from him, quiet and undeniable. You let someone else present it, he said after a moment, his voice lower now, more controlled. Clara did not deny it. Yes. They took the credit. Yes.
No hesitation. No resentment.
Just fact. Ethan's jaw shifted slightly, not from anger, but from something harder to define. And you stayed silent. Clara tilted her head a fraction. I chose not to interrupt, she corrected. Ethan let out a slow breath, leaning back again, but this time there was no attempt to reclaim authority. Just observation. Most people would call that a mistake. Clara's expression did not change. Most people measure value by visibility, she said. That is not always accurate. The sentence landed clean. No emotion attached. Just truth. Ethan glanced around the restaurant for a brief second, taking in the polished surfaces, the quiet wealth, the people who filled the room believing they understood how the world worked. Then he looked back at her. Do you know what that decision was worth? He asked. Clara did not answer with a number. She simply said, enough. Not dismissive. Not vague. Just complete. Ethan almost smiled again, but this time there was something different in it. Less control. More respect. You are very comfortable with less than most people would accept, he said. Clara shifted the plate slightly in her hand, balancing it without looking down. I am comfortable with enough, she replied. The distinction was subtle, but it mattered. Ethan leaned forward once more, resting his hands flat against the table now, no barriers between him and the conversation. Then why stay here? He asked. If you do not need recognition, and you do not need more, why this? Clara followed his gaze briefly, taking in the same room, the same quiet luxury, the same unspoken hierarchy that defined everything around them. Then she looked back at him. Because here, she said, people show you who they are without realizing it. Ethan stilled. The words were simple, but the implication was not. And what have I shown you? He asked. This time, the question carried weight. Not defensive. Not challenging. Just honest. Clara did not answer immediately. She studied him for a moment, not as a customer, not as a CEO, but as a person. The kind of look that did not evaluate status. Only substance. You listen when something matters, she said. Just not always soon enough. The sentence was quiet, careful, but it did not soften the truth. Ethan absorbed it without interruption. No reaction.
No argument.
Just a stillness that had not been there before. Around them, the restaurant continued its rhythm, unaware that something fundamental had shifted at a single table near the window. Ethan glanced down briefly, then back up at her, his voice quieter now than it had been all night. And now, he asked. Clara met his gaze, steady as ever. Now you are deciding whether it matters, she said.
No judgment.
No pressure. Just a statement. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan Caldwell did not have an immediate answer. The silence stretched, but it did not feel empty. It felt like something was being measured.
Not time.
Not words. Something deeper. Ethan did not move right away. He sat there, hands still on the table, eyes fixed on Clara as if the answer he had always trusted himself to give was no longer available. He had built his entire life on certainty. Quick decisions. Clear outcomes. Control. And yet now, faced with a single question, he found himself pausing. It does matter, he said finally, but the words came slower than he expected. Not weak. Just considered. Clara did not react to the statement. She simply watched him, the same way she had all night. Present. Unrushed. Unimpressed. Then what are you going to do about it, she asked. No challenge in her voice. No expectation either. Just a question. Ethan leaned back slightly, exhaling through his nose, his gaze shifting briefly to the window beside them. The city lights reflected against the glass, distorted, layered, like everything else in his world that looked clear from a distance but blurred up close. Most people would expect me to offer you something, he said. Clara did not interrupt. A position. A title. A number that makes this. He gestured lightly to the room, to her uniform, to the entire setting. Temporary. Clara followed the motion with her eyes, then back to him. Most people would, she agreed. Ethan looked at her again more directly now. And you would say no. It was not a question. Clara gave a small nod. Yes.
No hesitation. No apology.
Just certainty. Ethan let out a quiet breath. Something almost like acceptance. Why? He asked. Clara shifted her weight slightly, still holding the plate, but now it seemed less like part of her job and more like something she had simply forgotten to put down. Because you are still thinking in transactions, she said. Ethan's brow lowered just a fraction. And that is wrong. Clara shook her head gently. No, she said. It is just limited. The word hung there. Not an accusation. Just a boundary. Ethan leaned forward again, slower this time, his voice quieter, more precise. Then help me understand the difference. Clara looked at him for a moment, really looked this time, as if deciding whether the question deserved an answer. Then she spoke. A transaction solves a problem, she said. Understanding changes the person who created it. Ethan did not respond immediately. He absorbed it, the way he would analyze a complex model, turning it over, testing it, looking for gaps. There were none. So what you are saying, he began carefully, is that offering you something does not fix what I missed. Clara gave a slight nod. It might fix your image of it, she said. Not the pattern. The word pattern stayed with him. It connected to more than just this moment. It pointed to something larger. Something repeated. Something he had never stopped to examine because the results had always been in his favor. Until now. Ethan glanced down at the table, at the perfectly aligned silverware, the empty glass, the small details that had been adjusted without him noticing. Then back at her. And what would change the pattern? He asked. Clara did not answer right away. She let the question settle, as if the space itself needed to catch up to it. Then she said, paying attention before it costs you. The sentence was simple, but it landed heavier than anything else she had said. Ethan sat there, still, the weight of it moving through him in ways he could not immediately define. For the first time, the idea of control felt incomplete. Not gone. Just insufficient. He looked at her again, and this time there was no distance left in his gaze.
No hierarchy. No assumption.
Just recognition. And something else. Something quieter.
Respect.
You already knew I would ask, he said. Clara gave a faint, almost invisible smile. Yes. And you already knew your answer. Another small
nod.
Yes. Ethan exhaled slowly, leaning back, but this time not to create space, just to sit with what was already there. And in that moment, without raising her voice, Without asking for anything, Clara had done something no one in his world had managed to do in years. She had changed the way he was thinking. The conversation did not end. It settled, like something that had finally found its place after being ignored for too long. Ethan sat there, no longer trying to lead, no longer trying to define what came next. For the first time that night, he allowed the moment to exist without shaping it. Clara shifted the plate in her hand slightly, then finally turned, stepping away from the table with the same quiet precision she had carried from the beginning.
No annoncement.
No need for permission. Just movement. Ethan watched her go, not out of habit, but because something in him was not ready to let the moment close. She moved between tables with ease, adjusting details, responding to small signals, never rushed, never distracted. The room had not changed, but his view of it had. Every interaction now looked different, less transactional, more revealing, a reflection of something he had never taken the time to see. He glanced down at the bill folder that had been placed at the edge of the table without him noticing.
Clean.
Minimal. No pressure. He opened it slowly. The total was exactly what he expected.
No hidden fees. No surprises.
Just clarity. He reached into his jacket, pulling out his card, then paused. Not because of the amount. That had never mattered, but because the act itself suddenly felt incomplete. He looked up again. Clara was across the room now, speaking softly to another table, her posture unchanged, her presence the same as it had been when she first approached him. No difference.
No shift.
As if nothing significant had happened at all. And maybe, for her, it had not. Ethan closed the folder without placing the card inside. Instead, he waited. Not impatiently. Not to assert control. Just waiting. A few minutes passed. Then she returned, stopping beside the table with the same calm expression. "Is there anything else you need?" she asked. The question was familiar.
Routine.
But it did not feel routine anymore. Ethan looked at her, then at the folder, then back at her. "Yes," he said. The word came, without hesitation. Clara waited, not leaning in, not stepping back, just present. Ethan took a breath, not to prepare a response, but to make sure what he said next was not automatic, not rehearsed. "I need to understand something," he said. Clara did not interrupt. If recognition is not the point, and transactions are not the answer, then what is? The question stayed in the air, simple but direct.
No liars.
No strategy. Just honest. Clara looked at him for a moment, longer than before, as if measuring not the question, but the intention behind it. Then she reached forward, not for the folder, but for the pen resting beside it. She turned it once between her fingers, then placed it back down exactly where it had been. A small action. Deliberate.
Clarity, she said.
Ethan's brow lowered slightly. Clarity, he repeated. Clara nodded once. Knowing what matters before you assign value to it, she explained. The words were quiet, but they carried weight. Ethan sat there, absorbing it, not analyzing, not breaking it down into pieces the way he normally would. Just letting it exist. "And if I do not?" he asked. Clara met his gaze, steady and calm. "Then you will keep paying more than you need to," she said.
No judgment.
No edge. Just truth. Ethan glanced at the folder again, then back at her. Something shifting in the way he held himself. Not weaker. Just different. "And if I start paying attention?" he asked. Clara's expression softened. Just slightly. Not a smile. Something quieter. "Then you might finally see what was there the whole time," she said. The sentence settled, deeper than anything else that had been said that night. Ethan did not respond immediately. He simply looked at her, the noise of the restaurant fading again, not because it had stopped, but because it no longer defined the moment. And for the first time in a very long time, he realized something simple. He had not been missing information. He had been missing awareness. Clarity did not arrive all at once. It settled slowly, like everything else that had mattered that night. Ethan looked at the bill again, then at the pen Clara had placed back with quiet precision. The number on the page had not changed, but the meaning behind it had. He reached for his card, then stopped. Not out of hesitation. Out of awareness. For years, he had believed that value was something he assigned. A number, a contract, a decision made quickly and executed without doubt. But now, sitting across from someone who had changed the course of his company without ever asking for recognition, that belief felt incomplete. He placed the card back into his jacket. Instead, he picked up the pen. Clara watched, but did not comment. He opened the folder again, not rushing, not calculating, just deliberate. He wrote something on the receipt, then closed it gently.
No flerišķ.
No statement, just a quiet action. He slid the folder toward her. Clara glanced down briefly, then back at him. She did not open it right away. Is there anything else? She asked again. The same question, the same tone, but now it carried a different weight. Ethan met her gaze, and for the first time that night, there was no distance left in it.
No hierarchy. No assumption.
Just something simple.
Honest.
No, he said. Then, after a pause, that was enough. Clara held his gaze for a moment, as if confirming something unspoken, then gave a small nod. Not approval, not acknowledgement of status, just understanding. She picked up the folder and stepped back, turning without hesitation, moving on to the next table as if nothing needed to be added. Ethan remained where he was. Still. The restaurant continued around him, unchanged. Conversations, laughter, the quiet rhythm of a world that had always made sense to him. But something had shifted. Not outside. Inside. He reached for his phone, unlocking it out of habit, the familiar screen lighting up with emails, numbers, decisions waiting to be made. He stared at it for a second, then locked it again, without reading a single word. That was new. He looked toward the far end of the room, where Clara was speaking softly to another guest, her posture the same, her presence unchanged. She had not asked for anything. Not a position. Not recognition. Not even gratitude. And yet she had left him with something far more valuable than any transaction he had ever completed.
Perspective.
Ethan stood up slowly, adjusting his jacket, not out of habit this time, but as if resetting something within himself. He walked toward the exit, each step measured, not rushed, not delayed, just intentional. As he passed the front of the restaurant, he paused for a brief moment, glancing back one last time. Clara did not look up. She did not need to. The moment had already passed. And that was the point. He stepped outside into the cool night air, the city stretching out around him, lights reflecting off glass and steel, everything moving as it always had. But he did not move the same way. Not anymore. Somewhere behind him, inside that quiet restaurant, a waitress continued her shift, unnoticed by most, unchanged by everything that had just happened. But Ethan knew something now that he had not known before. Power was not always visible. Value was not always claimed. And the people who changed everything rarely asked to be seen. He walked forward, disappearing into the rhythm of the city, carrying with him a realization that would not leave, no matter how far he went. And for the first time in years, he was not thinking about the next decision. He was thinking about how he had been making them all along.